All right. It's Tuesday. It's Toon Tactics TV, and I've only got one question for you folks. Is Eddie Howe in or Eddie Howe out? Let me know what you think. Let's find out here on Toon Tactics TV.
Brilliant from Cher. And now Murphy could take on the shot. Fabian Cher
All right, folks. How are you all doing? You would think I would have learned how to adjust my mic just yet, but I'll be doing it during the show. But let me know how you guys are doing today. How has been your day? How have you been yourselves? What are you up to right now? Do let me know. I'm gonna just make a few adjustments to my screen today. And the biggest thing, the biggest question that we have today, obviously today, on the back of a number of disappointing results and a disappointing season so far, as Bruno Gomes has put it, we are asking the question: Eddie Howe in or Eddie Howe out? And so for today, guys, I have put together some research, some work in terms of Eddie Howe's tenure, and it's kind of been therapeutic for me in order for me to answer the question myself as well. And so, in order to be able to give a comprehensive answer to what we're saying, not just shout in no matter what or out no matter what, but to try and let you guys know from my perspective. And when I'm thinking about Eddie Howe, when I'm thinking about Newcastle United, the first thing I'm thinking about is Newcastle United, really. In terms of whatever kind of decision and whatever kind of thoughts are on my mind about it. So, and I think that's from everybody else as well. So we want to be able to give the most concise answer to these type of questions and what's going on. So guys, wherever you guys are watching from, wherever you guys are listening from, the question to you all is Eddie Howe in or Eddie Howe out in terms of Newcastle Football Club. And I'm wanting to know where you guys are standing on this and what your thoughts are. And maybe to help you, this today is essentially, let me show you some of the stuff I've put together, like a little bit of a presentation in terms of where my thoughts are at and what I'm doing from today. And I hope you guys enjoy the show. And guys, if you do come in, do let me make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. As always, folks, and let me know where you guys are listening from. All right, so we need to talk, and we need to talk about Eddie Howe. As fans, I'm going to be talking about it as a fan from a fan's perspective. I'm also going to be talking about it from if I'm the owner, if I'm PIF themselves, when I'm looking at Eddie Howe as well. And so I'm going to be switching between the two to kind of give a comprehensive answer today. And look, guys, I'm going to obviously talk about. First of all, I'm going to give an introduction. I'm going to let you guys know what my expectations are for this season, so you guys kind of know where I'm kind of heading with it, and kind of where my kind of thinking is with Eddie Howe as well. So you might think, why has he decided this, or how is he thinking like that? I think it's kind of based on my expectations as well for the season. We're going to talk about the current problem that we're in which is in this season. We're going to talk about I guess the two major points, or the two major problems that we had from last season that kind of bled into the season, and kind of PIF's solutions for that, which is obviously transfer strategy, not fit for purpose, Howe's transfer history, bad injury record, which was Howe's injury record, Howe's achievements, PIF solutions. That's PIF solutions to the transfer strategy in our injury record. Paul Mitchell, James Bunce, their kind of work, and Howe as a leader. Also, and then kind of also in terms of how as a leader, talking about that, and Newcastle's structure, how it's growing, and is Howe growing with it. And then I'm going to give a conclusion in regards to the answer. So it's going to be very, very comprehensive kind of look at things and how we're going to be doing it. So first and foremost, my expectations for this season in particular is that is for Newcastle in the Premier League to earn between 64 to 68 points. And that's because, as you folks know, obviously last season we ended up on 60 points. I think a big reason for that is because of our horrific injury record. And I think we battled valiantly in that season to get the 60 points. And considering the previous season when we got 71 points, where everybody, well, even Newcastle fans said that we overachieved, okay, which was fair and reasonable. The 60 points that we obviously received after that, due to the massive injury record, I felt that this season in particular, not only can we consolidate our position, but I thought we could improve on it by 4 points minimum. So another win, another draw. So I thought it was and we can really exceed and maybe excel on that, maybe with 2 wins and another draw following from the previous season. So I thought 64 to 68 points is reasonable. But let me know what you guys think, if that is reasonable, what your thoughts are. Now, that won't necessarily, that 64, 68 points won't necessarily get you to Champions League, but it should get you into European place. And I also have for domestic cups, semi-finals and finals. Now, obviously, that's in the back of previous season where we got into quarterfinals in both cups, playing in Europe, and again, having a horrific injury record and still managing to get into both quarterfinals, which is incredible. And the previous season when we got into the final, obviously, of the League Cup, and unfortunately didn't make it. So still believed. So I think it's reasonable for me to expect for us to get into the semi-final, finals of cup competitions. There's always context. If we, meet one of the top 2 sides and all this other stuff, then we kind of go out in a penalty shootout. Fine, whatever. I can live with that. But I thought it was reasonable for me to expect that as well. So, guys, I can see a few people have come in. Good to see you guys. Hope you are all well. I'm just going through my introduction, what I'm going to be doing. Obviously, the main focus is Eddie Howe in or Eddie Howe out. I'm going through the problems of the season. I'm going to go talk about the transfer strategy, the kind of the stuff that led to the kind of the issues into this season, the not so fit for purpose transfer strategy, the bad injury record. We're going to talk about Howe's achievements, Piff's solutions, Paul Mitchell, James Bunce, Howe as a leader, NUFC structure, how NUFC structure, overall structure is growing, and will Howe growing with it, and give a conclusion there. And obviously, you guys have just heard my expectations for this season, which is 64 to 68 points in Premier League, and obviously for the domestic cups, semi-finals and finals. So I believe at the beginning of the season, where I made these expectations, that these are reasonable expectations to have. But what were your expectations for the season? Let me know in the comments what your expectations are for this season. Before I move on, I'm going to read a few of the comments as well. We've got Mukhtar Mahamud here. Welcome, sir. I don't know if you've been here before, but if you haven't, welcome to the show. Hope you are well. I'm not, glad to have you. Eddie built a squad of the off the ball work rate rather than on the ball. Yeah. Plus, our 2 centre backs are League 2 players. We lack technical ability all over the pitch beside Isak, Bruno, and Hall. Can't disagree too much with you there. Can't disagree very much there, Mukhtar. And the rest of them were bought for their work rather than anything else. This is Paul Mitchell is so important. Yes, I agree. It's so important. We can't be playing like the likes of Joe Linton, who can't even control the ball right. I hear you there. Mikey P, good evening to you, sir. Big up to you. Hope you are well. Let me, the guys, know in the comment section again, before a ball was kicked this season, what were your expectations for Newcastle? I've given you guys my points expectations. I've given you guys my domestic cup competition. So for the Premier League, 64 to 68 points. Was for me, and for the domestic cups between semi-finals and finals. So I don't do it in positions in terms of, like, you're thinking, why is it points? Like I kind of do it in positions, I do it in points rather than positions, because points are a little bit easier for me to kind of understand and predict. Previous season we got 60 points. I believe that's because of the injuries. Last season before that we got 71 points. People will say that's overachieved, which isn't unreasonable. So I just felt that 64 to 68 points is quite reasonable. Anyway, so we've gone through the introduction. I've given you guys my expectations. We're talking about the problems. Oh gosh. So let's go into the problems of this season. I'm not going to waste. I'm not going to take up too much time. Well, we have to go through the problems. Let me take off this, and I'm going to kind of go through it statistically. A little bit of statistics first. What is going wrong this season? Let me know what you guys think is going wrong this season as I try to get this up on the screen. I'm going to talk about the team, obviously. First of all, we're 12th or 11th now. No, we're 12th. Goodness gracious. So we're 12th on 20 points. We have scored 19 goals in 15 games. It says 15 games, and conceded 21. We're on the -2 goal difference. And people will say, obviously, it is a very clustered league. So, the fifth spot is held by Nottingham Forest. They're 5 points ahead of us, right? And what is obviously deemed a very successful season for them so far. But we're not talking about Nottingham Forest, but Newcastle United. We're on 20 points from 15 games. I don't know what is that, like 1.5 points, 1.4 points per game. Horrific. It is not very good at all, right? So that's it. That's our current form. For instance, in the last 5 games, we obviously lost 4-2 to Brentford. after drawing 3-3 with Liverpool in a toe-to-toe, bang-for-bang, incredible game where I would suggest that Newcastle deserved to win that game just above Liverpool. We had that scary performance against Crystal Palace, who drew 1-1, and unbelievably lost to West Ham, who have been getting folded by every other team since then, 2-0. That's before the international break, where we beat the informed Nottingham Forest away, beat Arsenal, league leaders Arsenal, or second place Arsenal at the time, 1-0, and beat Chelsea. So that's just to highlight our inconsistency. I heard Antonio Mango, if you guys watch him, say that if there's one thing about our identity this season, it's the fact that we've been so inconsistent. So, and that's it. So, other metrics I'm going to read as well into that. Our current FOTMOB rating. I know FOTMOB rating doesn't say everything about you, but for me, it gives at least an indicator of where we are. FOTMOB rating takes all these metrics into count and gives an overall kind of rating of where your team is at. So it looks like goals per match, chances conceded, everything else that you're doing. And they put us as 12th, and we are actually 12th. So we are where we're supposed to be in terms of FOTMOB ratings. Because sometimes you're rated a little bit higher because of your metrics, because if you're getting lots of shots on target, you're pushing, you're getting corners, you're winning the ball high up, but you're just getting unlucky in matches. For instance, you're not getting the rub of the green. You're currently 11th, but everything in your attacking metrics, even some of your defensive metrics, are showing that you are a team that's better. You'll be ranked higher. Newcastle are dead on where they are. So the table doesn't lie, the metrics don't lie. And what do the metrics say? Goals per match, Newcastle United, 14th in the league for 1.3, 14th in the league. So we're not scoring a lot. Goals conceded per match, we're currently 10th. We're conceding a lot of goals in the match. We're a mid-table team in goals conceded, and we're below mid-table teams in goals scored. That is not good. I don't take too much from possession because it kind of all takes in account how teams play. Some teams are direct. Some, you'll find some. I think Southampton are in the top 3, top 4. So I don't take too much from possession. Clean sheets, we're 6th. Unbelievably, we're 6th. Probably says a lot more about the table, about the Premier League this season, how fiercely competitive it is. So we're currently 6th for 3 clean sheets. Expected goals for Newcastle United, 21.8. We've scored 19. We've scored 19, so we're just 2 below. So we're 11th. We're mid-table for goals expected. Incredible. Shots on target per match, we're 17th for relegation form for shots on target. Wow. I thought I was having therapy preparing for this, but I'm even getting slowly infuriated as I'm reading the the metrics so far, and I've read them before I even prepared them for you guys. So I'm surprised in myself that I'm even getting angry when I'm reading it. Big chances. Newcastle are 15th, close to relegation. Sheesh. Big chances missed. So big chances created, we're 15th. Big chances missed, we're 16th. So we're very low. So we actually can we don't create many chances, so we've been doing well in converting some of them, I suppose. Accurate passes, we're 11th. We're a mid-table club in accurate passes. Amazing. Accurate long balls, I don't read too much. 18th. Everton are the highest. That's because that's what they do. That's their style of play. So I don't read too much into that. I'm not gonna hit anybody over the head over that. Accurate crosses per match. We're 10th, again, mid-table. I'm not going to go into penalties awarded. It is what it is. We scored one, we missed one. Anthony Gordon. Touches in opposite box. We're 9th. We're 9th for that. So again, close to mid-table. Corners, we're top 7 for that. So, it shows some attacking intent from us, obviously. We are, we can do that. Defensively, XG conceded, so number of shots, 13th, below mid-table. Interceptions per match, 15th. So interceptions, cutting off passes. What that indicates is that you've got some structure in your team. So the higher you are, you've got some structure in terms of interceptions. It shows that you've got the players have positional awareness. There's some structure in your team. You would say, for all the stuff that Manchester United get, structurally, they're quite a good team. Bournemouth have been excellent, so their interceptions are very high. We're very low. And we see that because teams pass around us. Brentford is a great case in point. Successful tackles per match, 14th, below mid-table. Incredible. Clearances per match, 11th for that. Possessions won in the final third. Bearing in mind, in that season when we finished in the Champions League, we're like top 3, top 4 for this. Possession, because intensity is supposed to be our identity. We're meant to be front-footed, pressing from the top. We're 16th. We're going into relegation form. Bournemouth. They're just incredible. Are higher than us. We are 16th. Saves per match. Our goalkeeper is in the top 6 for saves per match. Let's look at the company that we're keeping in terms of saves per match. Brentford, Southampton, Leicester, Ipswich, Bournemouth, Chelsea, okay, Wolverhampton. So mainly around mid-table relegation teams for that. That's where Newcastle are at in terms of save per match. So it lets you know that teams are having a good go at us. If anyone's preparing for a Newcastle game, they know they're gonna test the keeper at least 3 or 4 times within the match, and there's a chance they could score. Okay, so discipline. I'm even vexed on the discipline that we're disciplined. We're not getting that many yellow cards. Maybe because we're not as intense as we used to be. I'm not saying that we have to get red cards and yellow cards and all that other stuff, but it's an indicator of how intense you are. So on a lot of metrics, Newcastle are mid-table to below mid-table to relegation. So that's where we are at the moment. So that's the problem. There's a number of problems there for Newcastle now. Not only are we 12th in the league, but we are deservedly 12th in the league. A lot of our metrics point to the fact that we are mid-table side / below mid-table side. So we are exactly where we deserve to be. I don't think we have a squad that is, in me personally, I don't think we have a squad that's mid-table, but I'm going to stick to the script. So that's the problem. I talked about the problem. And I'm going to then move on to maybe in terms of 2 of the issues that we had in the previous season that leaked into this season. So before I get directly onto Eddie Howe, but Eddie Howe is also involved in these these 2 things. The first one is the transfers, and the second one would be the horrific injury record that we had last season. Not to blame, not to do anything like that, but talk about involvement. Before I do that, let me read some of the comments that you guys have got. You guys have been coming in and you guys have been commenting. Really glad to have you guys join me this late evening. Some new names, some old names. Great to see you guys. Dan Snowden, How out, not good enough for where we want to go. So you made your choice early there. Fair enough. Aaron Cave, good to see you, sir. Hope you're well. Folks, do remember to like, share, and subscribe. I'll be honest, at the start of this season with no European football and the expectation for one or two signings, I had us third with the squad. Wow, Aaron. And I don't blame you for all the things. Even Pep Guardiola said, hey, look out for Newcastle United. They haven't got any Europe this season. They're going to be fighting for Champions League. So it's not that much out of the world to suggest that. Pep Guardiola was in the same line of thinking as you, as Aaron. Mikey P, after last season, definitely to be in Europe, yes. And the cup final, yes. We have, same as me, if we have one game a week with a good squad, not good enough. I accept that. Lady Sam, TTR, good point on the cards. Yeah, I agree. Lady Sam, are you from? Is that the Toon Review? If that is, welcome to the show and big up to the Toon Review as well. Hope you're well. Hope you're well. Yeah, if you ever get to see, I didn't get to see on the football on the cards, Lady Sam. But I remember reading. I'll be interested to know how many yellows we had in the 21-22 season when we finished fourth. I bet it was a lot. Maybe. Geordie Z. I bet I got this wrong. Hope, but it's great to see you again, sir. People want an improvement from last season after no signings, after 2 windows, and players lacking confidence. Everyone knows that if you don't sign anyone, you move backwards. Great point there, sir. And I'm going to be talking about signings, and I'm going to talk about confidence as well. So, do let me know what you think, Geordie Z, if you stick around. Lady Sam, the Toon Review check. Big up the Toon Review. Big up to you, Lady Sam. Checking this out. Good stuff, mate. Appreciate you for that. Thank you so much. Right. So, as I've mentioned, we've talked about my expectations. You guys have let your expectations known for this season. I said, look, 64 to 68 points. I've said, look, semi-final to finals in terms of cup competitions. We've talked about also what is the problem. We've laid out the problems. Or say problem. There's problemos. And that is, we're 12th in the league. We're not scoring a lot. We're conceding a lot of chances as well. We're very much mid-table to below mid-table, literally on every metric. Like, so we are. It's not that we don't deserve to be 12th. We fully deserve to be 12th. Unbelievably, we deserve to be 12th. So, leading up to this season, what was our issues? And I had this from my thumbnail that we talked about, which was the transfer. Geordie Z mentioned it. A few of you guys mentioned it. Our failed transfer window. It was our only failed transfer window. We had the winter transfer window that we failed as well. Now I'm not gonna go through the whole transfer history again, even though I've got it on here. So I've gone from our takeover. What I'm gonna say is this. Now, apologies, folks, because I think, let me see if you guys can see it. I know some of this stuff is small. If I go through it, I'm gonna give a whistle tour as to why we had the window that we had. And let me know what you guys think, what your views are, what your opinions are. So from our takeover, the main problem for our transfer window, why we ended up not buying anybody, as Darren Eales said to us after the transfer window ended, and it was reported in the I newspaper, we were £70 million over the PSR threshold. Whether we agree with the PSR or not is, I don't agree with it, but the rules, we are where we are. That was the reality. We're £70 million over the threshold. With about 48 hours to go, and we were on the phone to Anthony Gordon saying, we're gonna have to sell you, mate. In fact, the Iron newspaper reported that we had already, with Liverpool, we were already discussing payment structures. So Anthony Gordon was heading to Liverpool. Personal terms were already agreed with Liverpool. He's thinking he's going to Liverpool. Newcastle are arranging payment structures with Liverpool to say, hey, okay, we've agreed everything. Personal terms agreed. When are you going to pay this so we can deal with our PSR situation, because we're £70 million over? Thankfully, or unthankfully, however you look at it, and Nottingham Forest and Brighton both came in the final 24 hours and said, hey, we'll have Elliot Anderson and we'll have Yakuba Minte, and we was able to cover our PSR situation, and we didn't have to sign Anthony Gordon. So what led us to this point where in the last 40 hours of the window, we are £70 million over the threshold. Essentially, we didn't sell anybody. Since the takeover, we didn't sell anybody in the 4 or 5, 6 windows that we had under the ownership. And this is what led us to this point. I'm not going to blame the first window. In the winter transfer window, everybody knows we were facing relegation. The owners came in October. We had the January transfer window. They didn't have a sporting director, didn't have a manager. Steve Bruce, goodness gracious, was our manager. All these other things, they had a lot to sort out. That transfer window was seen as a situation where we had to just buy players. We bought 5 players. It cost us 130 million pounds. We didn't sell anybody. We didn't sell anybody that summer. Fine, fair enough. I'll let that go. So we didn't sell anybody that winter transfer window. Fine, I'll let that go. We didn't sell anybody that summer window, and that's where it became a problem for me. Now I'm reading back of it. That same year, 21-22, we didn't sell anybody. Okay, fine. They did it. Not fine with me, but that's what they did. The following year, 22-23 season, when we got into the Champions League, we spent 185 million euros on players. Brilliant stuff. We brought in the likes of Alexander Isak. Let me enlarge this. Obviously, we've got Alexander Isak. We've got Sven Botman, Matt Target. Those guys. We spent 180 million euros both in the summer and in the winter transfer window. Obviously, we bought Anthony Gordon that winter as well. We spent 185 million euros. Do you know how many sales we made? We sold 14 million pounds. 14, 1-4, not 40, 14. So combine that with 130 million previous to now, we're already 300 million pounds in purchases, and we've already sold 14 million pounds. You can see the picture that's building here. Whether I like PSR or not, you got to sell players. 14 million. Roll on 23-24, where we're now saying, it's getting bad. We spent another 148 million in that window. And in that year, we bought obviously Sandro Tonali, Harvey Barnes, Tino Livramento, Yankuba Minte, Lewis Hall, and others. Now, we spent 140 million and we sold, do you know how many we sold? We sold 44 million. We only sold 44 million. So that's what led us to the season of we're 70 million pounds over the threshold, and we had to sell. We were, as Eddie Howe put it, as Paul Mitchell put it, I think Eddie Howe did. Both of them put it. We were forced to sell players that we didn't want to sell. Minte and obviously Elliot Anderson, and we had to sell those players in order to meet the PSR threshold. So that's why that winter transfer window, that summer transfer window, we didn't buy anybody of significance, because we didn't sell anybody in the previous 4 windows, and we had the opportunity every single time. So that's why when they asked Paul Mitchell about the transfer window, he said it wasn't fit for purpose. He said in the context of PSR, and he was dead right. In the context of PSR, Newcastle's transfer window was not fit for purpose, and he was right. And he got pelters for it, but he was right. Paul Mitchell was not talking about the profile of players. I, for once, I agree with Eddie Howe. I think Paul Mitchell probably agrees with Eddie Howe. The profile of players, even for me, from Chris Wood to Matt Target, were fine, were great, because even those players, they came in to save us from relegation, and they did their job. So they were the correct signings. And look what Chris Wood is now. He's doing his best impression of Adriano, Ronaldo, all rolled into one, and scoring goals for Nottingham Forest. So it tells you that we've got the right players. We didn't sell anybody. So now we're in a situation, we did not sell anybody, and we're in the last 48 hours of the window, we're on the phone to Anthony Gordon saying, we're going to have to sell you, and we can't buy anybody. So that's the situation we're in. And that's the situation that Paul Mitchell walked in on July the 5th, where he said he's having to watch this go, and he's like, he's caught in the middle of it. He's just seeing what's going to happen. And what's happening is obviously what we've just told you, and he's just letting it ride out. He didn't want to interrupt things. Then all of a sudden you're hearing things, and this is where I'm speculating, obviously, around Mark Gahey. He's hearing 75 million. He said, nah, we're not paying 75 million. Liverpool paid 75 million for Van Dijk. Gahey is no Van Dijk. So I think, in my view, he said, no, we're not gonna. We're gonna have to. We've been given, and I think that him and the owner said we've been given another lifeline here. We've escaped PSR. We've escaped sanctions. we have to rethink and realign our whole transfer strategy. So that's why we didn't buy anybody this season. No one of significance. Obviously, we've got Osola and others, but we didn't buy anybody of this. So that was so our number one. One of our number one problems, obviously, was our transfer strategy, which was not fit for purpose. It was fit for purpose in the sense of the profile players that we got. Obviously, our team improved. Obviously, we got into the Champions League. Not only did we avoid relegation, we got into the Champions League. We got into the League Cup finals. We avoided relegation. We were doing really well. However, we did not sell anybody. We didn't have a fluid transfer window. And there's a whole thing I talked about in my other kind of video about it, where we have to learn to do what Liverpool do, Brentford do, Brighton do, having sell to buy players. There's a whole hour-and-a-half interview that Paul Mitchell has with the I newspaper where he talks about his strategy and what we're going to do. And you're going to see a lot more. You're going to see a lot more Jurgen Kuba type players being brought in. Either they make it into the first team or they get sold on, like Pivash and Vashdag and all these other players that are coming in. So you're going to see that happening more and more. So we had a not so fit for purpose transfer window, specifically in regards to selling, and that's now obviously had a ripple effect into this season where we haven't bought any first team players in, and we've had to realign our whole transfer strategy, and that's what people are talking about a lot more. Apparently, in terms of our squad going stale, and in terms of that, the other issue, obviously, from the previous season was our injury record. Our injury record is absolutely horrendous. Now, I'm not saying that Howe was responsible for people getting ACLs and stuff like that, but let me go back in terms of the transfer window, because this is obviously I'm trying to relate it to Howe. I'm going to conclude that before I go into the transfer in terms of the injuries. It's not Howe's fault in terms of he doesn't sign off the checks. We know that obviously the way the takeover happened, it happened very quickly, very suddenly, and they kept Steve Bruce on for longer than they should have possibly, but they were trying to get the best manager. That was meant to be Ume. Ume bottled it, and Eddie Howe took the job. God bless Eddie Howe for doing that. And not only did he take the job, he's excelled at the job, especially in that first year when he took out us a relegation. However, we did not have a proper structure in our club in terms of actually everything was on Eddie Howe essentially, because the owners are not footballers, not directors. They had Eddie Howe, maybe obviously Steve Nixon and others who are, obviously Eddie Howe's a manager, but he's had to be a sporting director, a manager, all during that period of time where obviously we're trying to get players in to survive relegation. Then we're trying to get players in to improve the next season. We took a while to get Dan Ashworth. We know how that story went. But by the time Dan Ashworth came, there was already a system of transfers and recruitment that was set. Eddie Howe was talking about that. But where, you might guys not like this, where I have sympathy for Dan Ashworth, he is now the sporting director. And I think he tried to have some influence over our transfer strategy because he could see what Paul Mitchell can see is, hey, this is not fit for purpose within the context of PSR. I don't mind the players that you're bringing in, their quality, their caliber, their talent, but these players we're not selling players. We need to sell players. How about Joe Linton? How about Sean Longstaff? How about Kieran Trippier? How about all these other guys? Callum Wilson? No. Okay, this is going to cost us. Fine. Dan Ashworth bowled it and he left. So this is what part of the problem was. Our transfer strategy was tailored around a manager in Eddie Howe. It's not necessarily his fault, it's how things turned out. But this is what you get. We had a short-term thinking about it. Eddie Howe's not thinking about what players can I get in the market that we might buy today and sell on next time. Eddie Howe's thinking about players that can impact the first team, which is fine. And so our first team improved. However, our status within sustainability, PSR, didn't. And it's affected us highly to the point that I've described. So the owners learned from that situation, or they were slow to learn from that situation. Plus, we had that whole boardroom stuff going on with Amanda Stavely and Murder Gadusi, where we kind of later learned that obviously they had a very strong and heavy bias towards Eddie Howe, and they were overruling the types of Darren Eales and I suspect Dan Ashworth and others in the decision making. Where I think Darren Hills and Dan Ashworth, and later on we find out Paul Mitchell, are all saying, hey, this transfer strategy is not fit for purpose. We need to sell somebody. We need to sell people in order for us to stay afloat. Those things were ignored. We then get into that situation that I mentioned around Anthony Gordon. The PIF owners had enough, and Amanda and Amida paid the price for it. Eddie Howe remains because he's not supposed to be a sporting director. He's a manager. And in that time, if you guys remember, we tried to get Dougie Freedman, again, under the advisement of Eddie Howe, Paul Mitchell, and Amanda. Dougie Freedman took us down the Primrose Garden, where eventually he got found in a private men's club with Alex Ferguson. Do not be surprised if the next person that Man United, technical director, recruitment director, that Man United hire is Dougie Freedman. He led us up the Primrose path. Later on, Crystal Palace also led us the Primrose path with Gahey. The owners had enough of this as well. They said, okay. And remember, during that time, and there's articles to say this, that Eddie Howe, Amanda Staveley, and Mirdad, that side want Dougie Freedman. Piff wanted Paul Mitchell. Piff wanted Paul Mitchell for a month. They kept him on ice. As soon as Mirdad and Staveley go, Mr. Paul Mitchell comes in. This is what's happened. A whole realignment process. But he's coming July the 5th, and he's looked around and said, sheesh, oh, this transfer strategy is crazy. It's insane. It is not going to work. We're not buying Gahey for 75 million. No way, we're not. We're going to have to sell some players. And so we had that whole fight. So that's part of the big reasons I've kind of gone into it in terms of why the PSR has been why we didn't buy anybody in this transfer window. Yes, we had a situation, obviously, with Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe has some responsibility in that, but at the same time, in my view, Eddie Howe is acting not as a sporting director, because he's not a sporting director, but as a manager. So I don't blame him for having a short-term view in terms of buying players to improve the first team. That's what a manager's supposed to do. But there was a problem at the top that led to this type of situation where we're on the phone to Anthony Gordon in the final 48 hours saying you're going to Liverpool. And sometimes people say that, managers aren't being backed. Eddie Howe's not being backed. Sometimes being backed isn't giving the manager money. Sometimes being backed is not giving them money. How about we don't pay 75 million for Gahey? We're not going to do that because that's insane. How about we don't spend 40, 50 million while we're 70 million pounds over the threshold PSR facing sanctions? And we know how the Premier League and the top six are looking to sanction Newcastle United. So Paul Mitchell did the brave thing, did what he was called in to do and said, no. And now we're in a position where we've got a little bit of headroom, but I expect sales. I expect sales in this winter transfer window. They've already muted Harvey Barnes, Sean Longstaff, Almiron, maybe Callum Wilson. Somebody's going to go. So I know we're looking for players to recruit, a right wing forward, a right centre back. I'm focused on the sales that we make because I'm keen for us not to make the mistakes of the past. I think Paul Mitchell is as well. So that's the first issue going into this season, why it's led to where we are. Part of Eddie Howe's responsibility, partly not. Like I said, he's acting as a manager should, which is for his first team. However, that has had a ripple effect on our PSR situation. Hence, we're going to talk about later Paul Mitchell coming in. I'm going to read a few of your comments before I go into the injuries. Andrew, Garrett, no. Let me know what the no is for, Garrett. Andrew, it'd be great to know. Welcome to the show as well, sir. Davey Eddie, hi Philip. I've mentioned this before. I feel Joe Linton might go. Those burglaries really affected himself and his family, according to a statement he gave. Massive shame. It would be. It would be. It might be explained why we're looking at Nemeka from Dortmund, who's very similar profile, but better in terms of ball control. Mikey P, facts. We were a new club with ambitious owner, which was learning on the job. Yeah. And we're getting wiser to it. So this is a learning process. Davey Eddie, hi Lady Sam, podcast royalty. Yes, indeed. Dan Snowden, just on the 70 million PSR. Just on the 70 million PSR hole. Barnes took us 38 million pounds over. A sale of Miggy in either Wilson or Trips gets us most of the way there. Would then have had a go gone on Anderson, Joey, left wing, Minte, and Murphy, right wing. Anderson would then have had. I don't understand the final sentence there, but I see what you're saying. Obviously, if we sold better and we would have met the threshold exactly, and I think we took a risk. We thought, okay, Wilson, Almiron will go to Saudi. We'll probably make about 50 million. 60 million at a stretch, but probably 50 million, and we'll be all right. And maybe we'll sell somebody else, but it didn't pay off. Almiron didn't want to go to Saudi Arabia. Wilson he wants to stay in England. So that Saudi Arabia, that selling to them to Saudi Arabia dream was over. They thought they could do the same thing with AS. They couldn't. They took that risk and it didn't pay off. They learned from that. I hope they've learned from that. I think they have. Lady Sam, hi Davey, thanks for that. Yeah, stumbled across this live quality stuff and a lot of work and sense here. Appreciate you for that, Lady Sam. Much appreciated. Geordie Z, so what you're saying is PSR is affecting us more than other teams? I think what I'm saying is, I think both are doing. I think our decision making has impacted us, as I've kind of demonstrated from the first window, and I kind of gave it an allowance because it was our first window. But at least from our second window onto now, we, for our own decision making, which is not selling and just buying players for the first team, buying players, maybe overpriced them for some players, has affected us now. The PSR in itself, in its system, is not fit for purpose for every team. That it's obviously is the way is now turned out. There's only the select few, top six, who essentially it's guarding and protecting with the way that it's set up. It's here for the sustainability, apparently for sustainability. Newcastle owners are sustainable, will be okay. So we'll go into the whole PSR situation, but I think it's both things. I don't like how the PSR situation is set up. However, I think we've also not been clever, not been smart enough in terms of how we've dealt with PSR in not selling players, and it's affected how we are now. So I think both of those things at the same time. Once Newcastle get better at selling, which I anticipate they will, and do those other things, then I think the PSR situation will come more and more to the fore. I mean, look what's happening to Man City. I hope I've answered your question there, Geordie Z. If I haven't, or I need to clarify something, do pull me up on it. Appreciate you. Richie T, great listen. Just subscribe, bro. Appreciate you, Richie. Great to have you on the show, guys. Welcome to all the new listeners. Really, this is an incredible, incredible to have you guys. Eddie Howe in, Eddie Howe out. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm going through I'm trying to be comprehensive about it. It's not just, I want him in, I want him out, I want this, I want that. I'm trying to be as comprehensive about it as possible. So, guys, your thoughts and opinions are absolutely important. And please do remember to like, share, and subscribe, folks. And finally, before I move on, Lady Sam, what Phil is explaining is what has led to our lack of signing, which has contributed to our current form. Exactly. Thank you, Lady Sam. Oh, you're way more. I like people that are more concise than me. Appreciate you for that. So that was the PSR situation. And if you guys got any more questions, do send them in. Thankfully, we've got Lady Sam here for as long as we can. She can also chip in, and others as well. So, yeah. So that was the PSR situation. The other big situation that we faced, obviously, from last season was our injury situation, which was phenomenally bad. Let's find out just how bad it was. Again, apologies, folks, if you can't. I wonder if you guys can see this. It must be really small. I'm going to read it out to you in terms of how bad our injuries were last season. 23-24 season for Newcastle United. Number of injuries across the season, 41. 41 injuries. Number of players affected, 20 players were ruled out at some point. That's a whole squad. Days lost. So days lost in terms of the number of days each person is out. 1,950. So nearly 2,000 days lost due to injuries. The most of any top flight team. So we were the Man City of injuries. Injury rate, the third highest injury rate in the league behind Manchester United and Chelsea, who both had phenomenally bad injuries. That's what Newcastle had last season. So yeah, 40. So we were third. So we were third behind Man United in terms of most individual injuries. We were like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in terms of most individual injuries, but we were on 20. The top team, Tottenham, had 22. So we're pretty much in the top half of everything in terms of injuries. Horrific. Total days, 1,900. Worst injuries in the Premier League. Again, Newcastle, number 1, together with 3 other teams, Chelsea, Luton, and Man United. Our injuries were absolutely horrendous. This is what impacted us in 2023, 2024. And obviously, we've felt the ripple effects of that going into this season. And this is not including the ban to Tonali as well, which is the year ban. Separate issues altogether. Not going to go into it, but that we had another player that was out. We had 2 players out on ACLs, Sven Botman and Jamal Lascelles. Horrific, and we know the complicated story behind Sven Botman and what's led to that. It impacted our season. The ripple effects that we felt in going into this season, for instance, now. Sven Botman is still out. God willing, he comes back this year. We really, really need him. Jamal Lascelles continues to be out. Lewis Miley was out for the first part of the season as well. So we've Callum Wilson. Do I need to say more about Callum Wilson? Even Callum Wilson knows what his situation is. He's now obviously back on the bench. Great to see him. We hope he's here for 10, 15 games. We'll see. But we had a horrific injury situation. Now, I've outlined these points, and these are the things that impacted our season. Now, in terms of the injuries, now people have talked about Eddie Howe's style of play, the intensity, the players, essentially having to, the running themselves into the ground. And I haven't gone through a fine tooth and nail in terms of how many muscle injuries we've got, this, that, and the other. But people, and keeping maybe some players that are injury prone and getting older is maybe where we have more of a case for concern, which then, like your Callum Wilsons, we could have sold Callum Wilson. Why didn't we sell Callum Wilson? And could have avoided that situation and brought in a younger player in. So all those type of things, situations. Eddie Howe's kind of been blamed for his style of play, but I'm not on that train because this style of play is what essentially wins you games. And if you do really well and get good defenders, it can win you cups. So Newcastle aren't the only team that play with high intensity. Bournemouth are playing now with high intensity, but obviously Liverpool are well known for that. Man City are well known for that. And so in order to win stuff, that's what you got to do. The problem for us was that we're in more cup competitions and we weren't able to increase our squad in the way that we wanted to because, as we outlined earlier, of our poor transfer strategy. So a combination of all these things. So obviously we know the Sven Botman situation. Whether he wanted a surgery or not, he played on anyway, tore his ACL. It became very complicated. We know what the solutions were for this later, and I'm going to talk about that. But for both of these situations, for the poor transfer windows in terms of selling, for our horrific injury record, and Eddie Howe's team and their involvement in that, in terms of maybe bringing players back too early, kind of reoccurring injuries. I remember Jacob Murphy, dislocated his shoulder and was returned to play again the next week. He dislocated his shoulder again and was out for a month or so. Joe Linton pulling hamstrings, all those type of situations. I'm not a doctor in a position to understand how much involvement Eddie Howe or the team have in terms of that. But we know going into this year, I'm going to talk about it later, they've kind of changed their situation, how they look, when they're letting players back in. But we've paid horrifically for that, for two things that have impacted our season horrifically last season: our not so fit for purpose transfer window and our injury record. And obviously there's the different level of involvement of Howe in that. So this has had a ripple effect in how we are into this season and what's gone on for Newcastle United. But before I go into that, I want to also say on the back of that, I've kind of outlined two things, major things for Newcastle United. Like I've mentioned, the transfer window, the transfer windows, our lack of, that's everything that's happened to us, that it's not been fit for purpose, especially our bad selling, and obviously our horrific injury record. But I kind of said, where Howe's involvement has been in that transfer window. He was looking out for the first team, so he's had a very short-term vision. He's not a sporting director, but it's impacted us. It was on us in terms of the owners for not really stepping in my point of view. But I think they have a different approach in that, and kind of getting somebody in as soon as possible in terms of the sporting director to do that. They tried out Dan Ashworth, he bottled it. Obviously, the injury record was horrific. Bringing in players back too soon was horrific. I don't want to put too much. I don't want to portion blame, but it's difficult for me to understand where Eddie Howe's involvement is in that. I don't think he's bringing out back players against their will. If someone's really saying to him, "I can't play," I don't see Eddie Howe forcing that. But maybe the structure behind it, whose voice is to be listened to, is what's affected how they kind of, when they bring back players in the first place, which has improved the season. We're going to talk about that. In the midst of all that I've said, essentially, in terms of the things that have impacted our squad, I have to also note Eddie Howe's achievements in this period of time before the season. Remember, in 21-22, when we were second from bottom, we hadn't won a game in 10 plus. We hadn't won a game in 10 plus games played. And no team at this point of the Premier League, no team who hasn't won a game in the first 10 games has ever survived not getting relegated. Not only did we survive relegation, but we finished 11th from 49 points. That was unheard of. The following season, we had a 25-point swing, again unheard of, and we finished on 71 points of Eddie Howe in the 22-23 season. We qualified for the Champions League. We also got into the League Cup final, the first final we've had in years with Eddie Howe in that season. So, incredible achievements. The following year, when we're in the Champions League, we finished in both quarterfinals for the League Cup and the FA Cup. Unfortunately, we were knocked out the group stage of the European Champions League, but we gave it a go. We smashed PSG, and we were unlucky in terms of the penalties that was awarded against us. And we still managed to finish 7th on 60 points. So Newcastle, Eddie Howe took us from 49 points in the first season after the takeover, after we were second from bottom, to 71 points, 4th, and 60 points the following season. So there's a lot to say there for what Eddie Howe was able to achieve. Not only has Eddie Howe been able to achieve that, but he's also been able to achieve what in terms of his player development. And that's bringing on players like Anthony Gordon, who before going to Newcastle United, the maximum I think he got was like 6 goals or 5 goals in one season for Everton. He then went on to get 20 GA for Newcastle United. And now is now playing for England. Lewis Hall is now playing for England after coming on to Newcastle United. Look how his development has gone. Tino Livramento as well, now playing for England. Look how his development. These guys are promising fullbacks. Lewis Miley and the Premier League are lucky that he's been injured for the last couple of months, because they'll be talking about him right now if he was playing for the first team. Incredible talent. You're going to see him playing for England soon. And obviously, I saved the best to last. And that's the greatest hero arc in Newcastle's history, probably Premier League history, Joe Linton, who was looking at the worst Premier League signing ever made, then Eddie Howe turned him into a midfield beast, one of the best in terms of his profile, in my opinion, in the Europa League. So that all goes to Eddie Howe's ability, in my point of view, in his ability to be able to develop players. And that's what he's been doing, and that's what he continues to do, which is incredible for him. So I wanted to outline that as well, in terms of, in the midst of some of the things that have gone wrong, these are the things that are Eddie Howe and kind of Eddie Howe's involvement in that. There's the other side of Eddie Howe, and I'm going to talk about his leadership style as well, which I rate very highly as well. He's brought on these players and incredible player development. So even if you're Paul Mitchell and you're the owners, and you're going to be annoyed about being 12th in the league, you're going to be annoyed about not getting a shot on target against Crystal Palace and all these other things. You're also having to keep in mind that, look at all these players that we have bought, and look how they've developed, and if we're going to take on the strategy of buying players to sell players and kind of develop players, Eddie Howe and his team are going to have clearly proven, have a clear track record of not only developing players, but creating a team culture and atmosphere, overall club atmosphere, where player development can actually grow and flourish. And we're seeing that before our eyes. Now, before I go to the comments and see what you guys are saying, so I've talked about Eddie Howe's achievement in terms of our league positions, our cup, what we've done in the cups. Obviously, we want to win the cups, but look where we've come from. But also in terms of player development, I also want to be able to add, before I go to the comments, I want to briefly talk about what I think Eddie Howe's leadership style is, and why I think he has elite qualities, elite ingredients to become really, really incredible a manager himself. I kind of taken this from, I don't know if anybody's heard of John Max, so I'm going to go briefly through it. John Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership, which is a framework for understanding understanding and developing leadership capabilities. So each level presents a progression in the leader's journey from level 1 to level 5. And sometimes you got people that have different elements of different levels in them as well. But obviously, as they get better and grow, they develop those levels as well. And kind of talk about where I think Eddie Howe is. Now, the lowest level is position. That's someone who just orders people to do. So I'm your manager, do what I want you to do, which you'll do, but you're only doing it because that person's a higher rank than you. It's not because you like them or you're inspired. It's the lowest form of being able to influence someone in a positive way. Permission. That's people who follow you because they like you. You've built a relationship with them. Production. People follow you because of what you've done for the organization. Leaders at this level have demonstrated results and achieved success. So Eddie Howe being able to get Newcastle out of the relegation, being able to get Newcastle into the Champions League, getting Newcastle into the League Cup final, that is developing players. That is a sign of a person that has done stuff for the organization. Number 4, people development. People follow you because of what you've done for them personally. Ask Joe Linton, ask Lois Hall, ask Anthony Gordon, ask Bruno Gomes, ask all these players and staff about what Eddie Howe's done for them. They followed him because of what he's done for them personally and how he has developed them and shaped their careers. And Eddie Howe's primal thing is, when he's talking about his players, is looking after players' well-being and their careers in themselves. So he's very much a player manager. He described himself that when he's talking to Simon Jordan. So leaders at this level have reached a level of influence and respect that excuse me, that's the wrong part. So at this level, leaders at this level focus on developing their followers and investing in their growth. That's very much like Eddie Howe. And the final pinnacle is like Sir Alex Ferguson stuff, which very few reach. Pep Guardiola's there, and right now people follow you because of who you are. Eddie Howe doesn't have that yet, right? So I'm not going to go talk about that too much. So in my opinion, Eddie Howe has a leadership style that aligns most closely with level 3 and level 4. So he's got production, he's got a proven track record, in terms of our league position, our cup positions as well. Obviously, we want to win cups and we want to be in Europe regularly. But obviously, in the last 3 seasons, he's achieved that. People development, we've shown that earlier. Look at the play. That's just some of the players I've mentioned. There's players that I haven't mentioned. So he's clearly got elite level qualities in order to be that show that he has the capability of being an elite manager. He's got the right ingredients as well. So I wanted to be able to show that in the midst of also explaining the situations that have led us to this part of the season. Bad transfer strategy, of which Eddie Howe has been a part of. Bad injury record, which he has had some involvement of, but I'm not too sure as to when to say he's responsible for this, responsible for that. I think what it points to is a bad communication and probably background in terms of kind of been able to look out after player welfare in a proper manner. We're going to talk about how these were addressed in a moment, but obviously Eddie Howe's the manager at the time, and he's involved in that as well. But also, in the same time, he's got a proven track record with Newcastle so far, where he has shown us that he can take us up the league, he can get us into Europe. The only reason we're not in Europe now, we finished 7th, is because Man United beat Man City in the FA Cup, for instance. So he's shown that, and he's proven that, in my view, that he has elite qualities, elite ingredients as a manager. Whether that's enough to keep him on as manager, we will see. But I just wanted to be able to provide a comprehensive outlook of Eddie Howe, and I haven't finished just yet, of where we're coming from when we're talking about Eddie Howe. But let me know what you guys think so far. Do you see him as a coach that has elite qualities? Or, what qualities do you think he lacks? Or maybe there's other things I haven't mentioned that you would want to see, that you maybe see other managers that have. Do let me know. I want to be able to do that. So before I kind of go on to our solutions for the previous problems, what PIF have given for our previous problems, 2 main issues, which was the transfer strategy, or the not so fit for purpose transfer strategy, and also obviously our criminal injury record. We're going to talk about those solutions, but obviously I'm going to read your comments before I do that as well. And welcome to all the new folks that have come in. Like, share, and subscribe as well. Appreciate you a lot. Dan Snowden, Barnes was the biggest mistake. Not signing him plus 2 or 3. Not signing him plus 2, 3 sales sorts it. He's overvaluing players and not ruthless enough with dead wood. If you're the hierarchy, surely no way you give him more money. Well, again, I don't think he was meant to get that money. He was meant to be a supporting director. There's meant to be a supporting director, and the CEO. It's not just how, how can give an idea, but there's a whole backroom staff and people that are where these checks go through in terms of who they buy and who they don't buy. At the time, as I mentioned, Amanda Stavely, Murder Gadusi, Eddie Howe, and I suspect one of the Reuben brothers who's gone away with it, were heavily biased towards Eddie Howe, and this ruined the balance in the boardroom and ruined their decision-making over transfers, which led to the situation where we're at now. That has been resolved, and there's been a realignment in the boardroom level, and now I've got sporting director and Paul Mitchell who's doing that. We're going to see how good he is, and I think it's going to be great. But we're going to see the proof in the pudding this January coming up. In terms of Harvey Barnes, I personally, whether you guys think or don't blame Newcastle, the owners getting Harvey Barnes, because when we got Anthony Gordon, he was primarily playing right wing for Everton. So the idea was Anthony Barnes for left wing forward, Anthony Gordon at right wing. Remember, Harvey Barnes got injured in the first or second game of that season, and Anthony Gordon took the left wing forward spot. And what happened after that was history, because he got 20 GA, and we realized that Anthony Gordon is actually really good at left wing. In fact, he's so good that Barnes can't get back into the team, and Barnes can't play right wing forward. So now that makes it look like, and now we've got Willock back, we've got Joe Linton back, even though Joe Linton's not left wing forward, but we've got Anthony Gordon there essentially. Barnes isn't going to play right wing, he's not very good at right wing. and he's not better than Gordon. So now Harvey Barnes, who's still a very quality player, has got 5 goals this season and 1 assist, isn't getting. So now he looks like surplus to requirements, like we should have never bought him. I encourage everybody to go back to journalists when we first bought Barnes and how everybody was celebrating it. Nobody was saying, none of the journalists, none of the media was saying, why have we got Barnes when we've got Anthony Gordon? Nobody was saying that. No, I'd love to be proven wrong on that, but I just remember that. The idea was Isak up top, Barnes on the left, Gordon on the right. Barnes gets injured, Gordon goes left wing forward and gets 20 GA with Isak. So that's why Harvey Barnes looks like surplus to requirements, in my view. But, let me know what you think, Dan. Let me know what you think. Mukhtar Mahmood, my apologies, sir. Mukhtar Mahmood, we have overpaid for certain players. 55 for Tonali. In hindsight, 55 for Tonali is overpayment. Again, I want to be able to see what pundits, what football experts were saying that's overpayment at the time. But Tonali was the vice captain of the Rossoneri. He was the captain of, which is AC Milan for people that don't know, and he was also the captain for Italy's under-21 squad. I can't remember if he's won the Scudetto for AC Milan. He was 22, 23 at the time. How much do you pay for someone of that talent and skill? 55 million at the time seemed reasonable, possibly. But in hindsight, after the ban and everything else, then you can say, he's not worth 40 million. But at the time, if you read his background and see what he is, you're thinking it's a steal. But if we buy Tonali and then we have to then sell, why didn't we weren't selling at the time as well? So that made it worse. These decisions became worse. Lady Sam TTR, we got scammed, Mukhtar. Ashraf didn't do his homework. He's worth the price, but they knew of his illness. Oh, they did, they? I didn't know that, lady. If they knew of that, then yeah, that was insane. I didn't know that they knew. I didn't know that. That's insane if that's the case. Mukhtar, Dan Ashworth and Eddie Howe like the British market, but also mean we are getting smart deals. 40 million for right back outside England gets you an established right back, not youngsters. And that's what Paul Mitchell is here for. But also, if you buy, it also increases the certainty. This is the problem, because the reason why Eddie Howe's not the only manager that buys British. There's a lot of Italian coaches that who, for instance, manage in Italy tend to buy Italian players. For instance, the idea is that you got more chance of success with those type of players because they're already in the league and they're already in the culture, so there's less of a risk. But again, this is the owners, and not just Eddie Howe. This is the owners. When you build your transfer strategy around the manager, you're going to get a manager-orientated transfer strategy rather than a club-orientated transfer strategy, which is what we're trying to do right now, which is broaden our eyes towards other markets. So I do have a kind of see where Eddie Howe's got. I do say, yes, Eddie Howe's responsible for this, but at the same time, Eddie Howe isn't doing anything that he isn't. He's been Eddie Howe. He's been a manager. He's doing what he knows. So I don't blame him for that. It's kind of part of it is Eddie Howe, but part of it is the owners, in my point of view. And we're growing and we're learning from that. Still don't see Tino's a 40 million. Eddie Howe targeting only English players for overpriced amount is one of the reasons why I'm Howe out. Okay, Howe out. We got Botman for 35 million. There's deals like that instead of overpaying. But then, Mukhtar, on one hand, you say we want Howe out because he's overpaid for players. But then Botman, who's also under Howe, it was a good price. I don't know, you're not giving him credit at the same time for that. So I look at that and there's a part of me that agrees with you, but there's another part of me that says, he's a head coach now. He's not even a manager, head coach. He's not supposed to be negotiating anything. It's what we got sporting directors for. It's what we got owners for. So in terms of whatever price we agreed for these players, now that we're looking at in hindsight, if you're talking about Tino, Hall, or whoever, that's on the owners. That's what Paul Mitchell's here for again. So I don't, in terms of price negotiation, I don't think Eddie Howe's on the blower negotiating prices. He shouldn't. If he is, that is, our structure is even worse than I thought it is. And I personally don't think that's happening. Geordie Z, in my opinion, watching Newcastle away from home this season and the end of last season, Eddie Howe has changed his style of play. I think the injury situation, Eddie's high press and work rate has played on his mind. I wouldn't disagree with you on that. And funny enough, I've talked to Man City fans where they don't have certain technical players to kind of slow down the play, dictate play, kind of keep possession. And if they don't have those players around, they're having to run a lot more, and that's where the injuries are caused as well. So really, Newcastle just need more technical players to be able to hold the ball and dictate play as well. So I can see what you mean. Maybe that would be on his mind as well. Mikey P, that's why we are losing games. High intensity has made Newcastle tired, combined with no signings. We are off it. I'd only say to you, we're playing less games now. Even Eddie Howe said in Simon Jordan interview, we're playing less games now. We've got way more rest now. I don't know. I personally don't see that as an excuse in terms of being able to rest. I think we've got aging centre backs. That's for sure. And that's cool. Yeah. So before I move on, I'm gonna. Oh, they're all going in. They're all coming in now. Oh, you guys, I didn't see there were so many comments. I'm gonna carry on with the show. Otherwise, but guys, keep sending your comments. Like, share, and subscribe, folks. We've got like a record number of people in the show tonight. So, guys, thank you so much. Now, as I mentioned, on top of everything else, the key components that we just talked about, which has rippled from last season into this season, our not fit for purpose transfer strategy and our bad injury record, of which Howe has had some involvement in all these things. On top of that, Howe has also proved, in my opinion, to have a good track record, especially at Newcastle United in terms of league positions, cup positions, player development. I do also think that Howe has elite leadership ingredients in him, which is that you can see in terms of obviously his track record, but also in his player development, and which is very, very important, very, very key. So I'm keeping that in mind. So what did Newcastle do to essentially deal with their not so fit for purpose transfer strategy and their horrific injury record from last season? Well, starting off with a horrific injury record, they brought in Mr. James Bunce. And I've done a show on James Bunce. So you guys do look into that. Incredible background. What he did at Monaco, how he reduced their injury record through really cutting edge technology, but also how he puts all these medical departments underneath him, including psychology, science, medical health, performance, all these type of things. And you would have seen, for instance, article released by the I newspaper today, which I've read, about how they're using AI technology to be able to help them understand, where players are at in terms of their fitness, to ensure that they can almost see the injuries before they start happening, so they're able to prevent them more. And what we've essentially seen, and I've taken this excerpt from the article. I'm going to read it to you guys to show you just how much they've improved. They've reduced injuries by 33% so far, preventable injuries. And we can see that from the fact that we got players, our bench in particular is getting a lot more depth in it now, in terms of players that are available to us. Callum Wilson, for instance, Kieran Trippier. I don't know where Joe Willock is. He wasn't here last game, but Joe Willock would have been on there. So our bench is looking better. We're able to play a lot more of our first team players more often. Alexander Isak, for instance, he had a toe injury at the beginning of the season, but he's back now. He's playing every game, looking good. Gordon, Barnes. We've got players available each and every time, which has been important to us. Pope. So we've seen a real kind of improvement in that. Hopefully, God willing, it continues. So this is an excerpt from the article from the I newspaper. Last season, Newcastle suffered 41, yes, time loss injuries, defining issues and serious enough of players to miss games. A rate of 9 injuries suffered of every 1,000 minutes of football played. So that's incredible. So far this season, they have suffered six time loss injuries in 13 games. A rate of 6 injuries suffered for every 1,000 minutes of football played. It's a drop of an impressive 33%. Incredible. I think it's a whole combination of things. How told the I paper, like I said last year when we were getting injuries, it wasn't one thing. If it was, it would have been a lot more easier to fix. The schedule plays a part. Yeah, it's obviously playing less games. Having less games helps. The games are the ones that produce the most fatigue. There are other things that are working together smarter. Obviously, performance director James Bunce has been really positive impact as well. Lots of things are helping us to keep the players on the pitch. So addressing that, so the owners have gone out and addressed that bad injury record through James Bunce, and we've seen the improvement in terms of players that are available to us. And I think for me, and I'm sure for you guys, the return of Sven Botman, and he's scheduled to play for the under-21s on the 16th of December, which hopefully will be the game before maybe he's at least returned back to the bench for the first team, will be a start for him. If we manage to see him in this year, it'll be incredible as well. But that will cap it off for us. So obviously, we keep the other players healthy and well as well, and just having Sven Botman back. So, and I'm anticipating that we'll see an upturn in form in that as well. So excellent. The other part is how we address the transfer strategy that was not so fit for purpose. And we've got Mr. Paul Mitchell in, and you guys would have seen previous shows where I've talked about Paul Mitchell, his incredible track record for instance, at Monaco, what he did for that team, how he reduced their squad size from 77 to like 33 to 35. It was a totally bloated squad. How a team that was like essentially mid-table, how in the 3 years that he was there, we're finishing regularly in the Champions League spots. So he totally revitalized their transfer strategy and everything else. On top of that, obviously, he brought James Bunce into that as well. So he's responsible for James Bunce. He's also responsible, obviously, for Tottenham when they were good, really good. You know, for the likes of Dele Alli, Son. I can't pronounce the defender's name. They had Alderweireld, all those players that they had. He's the one introduced to Christopher Nkunku, Mane, all these guys. These are the guys that he tried to get Mane into Tottenham as well. So, you know, he's got an incredible profile, ability to ID talent and everything else on top of that. And he's the one that's going to revitalize our transfer strategy. I encourage you guys to read the Iron newspaper and his interview with Douglas, where he talks about how it's important to look for talent overseas and to find those gems as well. But also they asked him about, okay, you're going to have to, in order for you to meet PSR, you're going to have to sell some big names and stuff like that. And he's saying you can avoid doing that if you essentially buy players that are like your mid players. So he gave an example of Liverpool, how they bought Fabio Carvalho and from Fulham, and he bought Van der Berg, who now plays for Brentford. Both of those players were bought like 2-3 years before, were loaned out. Those loan fees, they were able to get money from those loan fees. Both those players weren't first team players, nowhere near. And so when they bought them both for like a combined fee of maybe like 20 million, 25 million, maybe 30 million. And they both sold them to Brentford this summer for 50 million pounds. So they made like 30 million profit on the fee alone, not including the loan fees. But it's just smart business. It puts them in a position where now obviously they're negotiating with Mo Salah, they're negotiating with Trent Alexander. They don't have to sell any of those players because they're in a position of strength now. Newcastle need to be, if Liverpool are doing that with their level of revenue, which is like 3 times ours, who are Newcastle not to do that? And let's not talk about Brighton and Brentford because they put our transfer strategy to shame. So Newcastle have a long way to go. And this is the type of situation, this is the type of stuff that Paul Mitchell is trying to educate Eddie Howe on. Eddie Howe doesn't want to be educated. I don't know. I'm sure he does. But obviously, I've got a picture of here of Harvey Barnes. And I think Newcastle are trying to sell Harvey Barnes. They're looking to sell Almiron. We're going to see some sales in this window. There's a possibility. Now, I spoke about not selling big players, but we're in a position where now, where this is even before Paul Mitchell came in, where we're vulnerable to big players going. Obviously, there's whispers around Bruno Gomes, Man City, PSG. Isak's not going to go. Well, that's not going to happen. Anthony Gordon either. But there's rumors around about Bruno Gomes. I don't think, from what I've heard of Paul Mitchell, he's scared of those players going because he knows the market so well. I don't want Bruno to go. He's our captain. He's so important to what we do. But it'll be interesting to see what Newcastle do. Should Bruno go, Barnes, whoever goes, what we do in this transfer window in terms of players coming in. But I'm really focused on the sales that we make as well. I'm really interested to see what kind of strategy that we employ. We've got a hint of that from what Paul Mitchell is saying, and we're going to see that happening. So we talked about that, and this is obviously now the owners have stepped in with Paul Mitchell. They've to address the transfer strategy and make it fit for purpose. They're addressing the injury record through James Bunt, and that's obviously having an effect currently. 33% less injuries compared to what we were seeing last year, which is great. And obviously, we're going to see the proof of Paul Mitchell starting this January of what we're going to see, what Newcastle's transfer strategy is going to be. So now Eddie Howe has less weight on him in terms of what he's got to do going forward. I'm going to give Eddie Howe credit, especially with the James Bunt situation, where I question where Eddie Howe's come from a background where, for instance, at Bournemouth, he was everything. Newcastle went before in terms of like Bournemouth, sporting director, everything to them. He came into Newcastle, it was a similar situation. And I always wondered what's going to happen when obviously it's at Newcastle, we're a bigger club, we're looking for bigger things. And so we're going to he's going to have to work with people who are essentially doing the jobs that he was doing before, but at a higher level. Paul Mitchell at the transfer end, James Bunt dealing with the performance stuff. And so far, the way I've seen Eddie Howe interact with James Bunt and everybody else, and we've seen the impact on the injury record, it's been positive. I know there's some controversy, for instance, around Tonali not playing for the Brentford game. I suspect he was advised, and he's followed that advice from James Bunt to say, in the short term, this might hurt, but in the long term, for a player that hasn't played for a year, let him play. I understand. I've seen experts, far more experts than me, that said these are elite athletes, let them play. And obviously, we pay for the price for that against Brentford. Let's see in the long term, at the end of the season, where we end up, if this kind of method pays off. Hopefully, it will. It paid off for Monaco, so hopefully, it will pay off for Newcastle. And obviously, we're waiting on what's going to happen with Paul Mitchell in terms of sales, in terms of PSR, and everything else. Now, before the conclusion, I want to talk about Eddie Howe specifically. Obviously, I talked a bit. I'm gonna go back a little bit for the folks that didn't know. Which going to go kind of why I'm talking about Eddie Howe. I gave the introduction. We talked about the problem of Newcastle. We're taught from the league. Transfer not being fit for purpose, bad injury records. We've addressed that with Paul. We talked about Howe's achievements. We talked about PIF solutions, which is Paul Mitchell, James Bunt. We talked about Howe as a leader, and I believe he has elite leadership qualities. And now I'm talking about NUFC structure. We're going to talk about NUFC structure and how it's growing and will Howe grow with it. And that part of that structure is obviously James Bunt and Paul Mitchell. Talking directly about Eddie Howe, and I've said that he's an elite, I believe he's an elite leader. and he's shown it in his player development, in his track record. However, this season and the results that we're seeing is a downturn in form. I'm going to go to a YouTube clip of Antonio Mango talking about the Brentford game, but he also talks about where Eddie Howe has gone wrong tactically. He's also mentioned these same similar things in other videos, so it's not just individualized to the Brentford game. It's also ripples out to other Newcastle games itself and where things are going wrong there. So we're going to put some question marks there. But before I do that, I'm going to read for a few comments. Apologies if I haven't read yours out yet. Again, I'm so thankful. So many comments and stuff that I don't get the chance to read them. Before I go into kind of, I'm going to read the comments now. But before I go into kind of talking about Eddie Howe's tactics specifically, but also talking about the team and where we're at, before we come to a conclusion on Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe in or Eddie Howe out. Jordy Z, people have short memories about what Eddie Howe has done for this club. Yes, they do. If we ever let him go, there should be a queue of top clubs in for him. Spurs would have him now. Boy, would they. And boy, would he love a Romero and Van der Ven as his centre-backs. Ginger Hoskins, Philip, it's time to go 2 wins in 11 games, 30% win ratio. Sorry, mate, we lose next 3. He's fired. Let me know, Ginger Hoskins, who you go for if we fire Eddie Howe. David Eddie, always a blessing to see you on the show. I'm one of the most consistent guys that come on here. Hope you are well, sir, and having a good evening. Slot and Frank praising NUFC to the hilt. Slot, yes. And Arnie Slot. I was thinking, who's Slot? Arnie Slot, obviously. And I was thinking, who's Frank? Obviously, it's Frank, yeah. From Brentford. Slot and Frank praising NUFC to the hilt and saying how proud they are to get points from us, as well as Pep. Yes, that's true. We get full praise from them. They know a thing or two. I agree. Cockeyed Cyclops, I'm an hour behind Geordie living in Utah. I'm totally behind Eddie Howe. Big up to you. Oh, big up to you. So I hope you're well. How's Utah? Make sure you see the beginning of the show as well. It kind of, because I've gone through a whole kind of load of things to the point where we are now. But I hope you're enjoying the show. Great to have you join from Utah. Hope you are well in. And you are fully behind Eddie Howe. Lady Sam, need to drop, but quality information dropped a like and sub. Big up to you, Lady Sam. I hope you are well. Thank you for coming in and contributing. You've been absolutely phenomenal. I appreciate you so much. Hope to see you again. Thank you so much. Davey Eddie. Barnes, 5 goals from 15 games. Yeah, and from the subs bench, most of the time, the lad will continue to get goals for us. Just need to sort the inconsistency of the team. But let me ask you, Davey Eddie, if we had to sell Barnes in order to get, for instance, a right wing forward, whether it's Johan Bakayoko who's on there, but whoever the quality right wing forward is, if we had to sell Barnes to do that in order to balance our attack, would you be up for it? Do let me know. Good night, Sam. Antagonizing Jordan. Sorry, my reading is bad. Antagonizing Geordie. Welcome to the show, sir. I don't know if you've been here before, but if it's your first time, welcome, and I hope you are well. Barnes, 10 goals in 13 starts. Eddie Howe, bad decisions with lineups. I think he has took us far as he can, and the board are not backing him. It's only a matter of time. I'd have Terzic or Allegri. Credit to you for at least saying where you stand, but also giving solutions to who you'd have in place for Howe. Appreciate you antagonizing Geordie. And finally, before a mighty win, big up to you, sir. Good to see you. Good to see you. I hope you are well and good health. The mighty win. So, Philip, we have a super fit squad who can't win games because they're not allowed to exert themselves as they did. I think they're allowed to exert themselves. I think this is a good segue, mighty win. This is a good segue into Antonio Mango. He's for those that don't know, he's a under 23 scout. So he has a really good, I really like his expert opinion on what he says about Newcastle United. He's also a Geordie, so he does a lot of quality videos, obviously, on Newcastle United. and others as well. Let me. He says something in the videos. He says a few things in the videos that I think is really interesting. Have I lost it? I hope I haven't lost it. I need to see this. That I want to touch on essentially, and okay, I'm gonna have to load it up again. But whilst I do that, what do you guys think so far? As I've mentioned, it's not only Eddie Howe, but it's also the owners who have gone through a learning process. And I don't blame them because none of them are or were football club owners. None of them had um, football experience, football skills. They have all been learning on the job. And so they've been learning how to manage a club. And obviously that being Newcastle United. So there have been mistakes made along the way. So essentially, they rectify those mistakes with the transfer windows, with the injury records. They've learned as they've gone. What do you guys think? How do you think they view Eddie Howe? You know, do you think they see him as part of their vision? Let me know, because I think. Well, I'll let you know once I get my video on. Come on, where are you? I had a video. Come on, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Videos. Antonio, under 23's professional coaching scout. Where are you? What has gone wrong? What has gone wrong? Where are you? What has gone wrong? Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Found it. Well, he actually talked about it here, but he talked about it a lot more in the Brentford game. So he did a review for the Brentford game, and he was vexed. But here we go. Here we go. Let me show it to you guys. But I'll use like I said, he's not talking. This isn't in isolation to the Brentford game. For anybody who's watched Antonio Mango's talked about this, he's did a whole video on what has gone wrong for Newcastle, for Eddie Howe and Newcastle before. And so the Brentford game was kind of a reflection of that. And so he talks about it here. So let me make sure I want to talk about some key points here. Let me make sure you guys can see on StreamYard here. So I'm using this to talk about specifically on Eddie Howe himself and what's happening in terms of his tactics. We know they've changed a little bit. And I want to be able to pose the question, is it Eddie Howe's tactics or is it the players? And where we go from here, essentially. So, we'll start off here, 20 seconds, where Antonio talks about Eddie Howe's tactics. Let me make sure you guys can see this. Yes, you can. Okay, so listen out for this, guys.
But for me, it all starts with Eddie Howe's team selection. What a terrific, intense performance.
So he starts off talking about Eddie Howe's team selection, and he was annoyed about Tonali not being included
against Liverpool. Why don't we build momentum on that? Why don't we start the same 11? Don't sit there and tell me that these players can't play 2 games in 1 week. These are elite athletes.
So he's in agreement with you there, Mighty Win. He's saying, don't tell me you can't start these players twice a week. These are elite athletes. Obviously, we're talking about Tonali here. I think it ended up being three games in it because we played Brentford. We played, who did we play before? Obviously, Liverpool. Before that, we played Crystal Palace. So it's almost like 3 games in 7 days or 8 days. But fine. Like I've said, I think Eddie Howe's following the advice, strong advice from James Bunce and the team. But fine, obviously, and the other side of it is what is Antonio's pointing out is we've now lost the momentum that we gained from the Liverpool game where we drew 3-3. We could have even won that game by not playing the same players.
These can play 2 games in 1 week. Brentford are unbeaten at home. We need to start our best 11. Tonali's probably been our best player the past 2 games. So what, you take him out the side because he's tired? I don't want to hear it. These are
he wasn't having that. So he wasn't having that. Now for me, and I'm totally understand that. I feel like if I'm Eddie Howe and I want to be able to show the owners that I can work with others, I can work with the people that they've selected to work with me, in the performance director, James Bunce in this case. And I want to be able to show, hey, that bad injury record that we had last season, that horrific injury record that I know that you guys partly blame me for because I played Sven Botman when I shouldn't have played Sven Botman and all these other guys. I'm willing to work with James Bunce, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to do that. That's where I think the whole thing you're now seeing with Tonali playing out, in my personal opinion. If this was last season and Tonali wasn't banned, and this was the third game in 7-8 days, Tonali's playing. But this is this season, after we've had 41 players or 41 injuries, 20 players out, however many injuries, and we're playing 17-year-old Lewis Miley in Champions Leagues and stuff like that. And the owners are saying, mate, we could have finished high up the table. We could have done better had you controlled your squad rotation better. Eddie Howe's showing I want to not only keep my job, but I want to be able to show that I can go from good to great and play and work well with others. There is a downside to this where you lose the momentum from an incredible game against Liverpool, and you want to keep those same players. You want to keep that intensity. You want to keep that same tactics and use them against Brentford, because if you can do that against Liverpool, God knows what you can do against Brentford. He didn't do that. He took off Tonali and he did Longstaff. So there's a 50-50 in that. So that's in my opinion. However, in the next section, Antonio talks about Eddie Howe's squad talks about the squad, and he talks about a little bit about Eddie Howe's game management. He talks a little bit more about his game management as well. So we'll hear this.
I can't believe the substitutions we bring on. Our squad depth, it's absolutely abysmal. When you bring on,
so okay, he's gonna mention substitution, but in terms of the squad depth, we talked about the recruitment situation. Eddie Howe can't fix the recruitment. He can't fix the squad depth now. Like, he can't. He has a squad that he has. We haven't bought anybody of significance in the last transfer windows for the reasons we've stated repeatedly before. And now obviously Paul Mitchell was here to ensure that we have a better squad depth. But we're not going to see the fruits of that like now. We're going to see that weeks and months later. So Eddie Howe can't do anything about it now. In my view, the squad depth is improving in parts. You've got Callum Wilson back on the bench. You've got Joe Willock. I know he wasn't on the bench this time, but typically he would have been there. You would have seen, I think, was it Barnes that was on the bench? He was on the bench. We had a better bench. Trippier was back on the bench as well. So we had players that were able to come off as well. But it made things worse. I'm going to rewind it a little bit there. It talks about the squad depth and obviously it's going to talk about the game management itself.
We bring on our squad depth, it's absolutely abysmal. When you bring on the likes of Callum Wilson, Almiron to win a game of football.
Yeah, Almiron. I take a hit on that one. Absolutely.
You've got absolutely zero chance. And I don't understand Eddie Howe's tactics, substitutions, or his starting 11. So he needs to take accountability for that performance.
So he was very adamant in this, and I understand where Antonio's coming from, because if you guys watch his preview before the Brentford game, his whole thing was, and I agree with him, because this is on the back of the Liverpool result where we drew 3-3. And you have to remember, and you guys know this season, we've played 5 of the top 6. We've only lost to Chelsea. We've beaten Arsenal. We've beaten Tottenham. We've drew with Man City. We've drew with Liverpool. Who's the 5th team? Chelsea, Man City, Liverpool, Man United. Not Man United. I forgot the 5th team we played. There was a 5th team we played. Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham. I forgot the 5th team. Guys, remind me who the 5th out of the 6 times we played. But we drew. And in fact, we even beat Chelsea in a League Cup in the League Cup and knocked them out as well. So I can see and Antonio's talking about in the preview to the game. He's thinking what most of us are thinking. Eddie Howe's just going to play the same squad he played against Liverpool. I suspected that he wouldn't, and Eddie Howe said it in his press conference that he's not going to, because he has to rotate the team. Regardless of this, we're thinking that he's going to play the same team. Do the same thing that you did against Liverpool. High intensity, high press, 3 at the back, 1 in the midfield to receive, that being Bruno, who can take it on the turn, on a half turn, send McAllister back to Argentina, pass it off to Alexander, who's thunderbolts in the top corner. Can we just do that again against Brentford, essentially? I surmised it very shortly, very concisely, but essentially that. This changed, obviously, against the Brentford game, and this is where the vexation is from all of us, that this has happened. So he's not understanding Eddie Howe's tactics. He's not understanding what he's doing, why he's doing it, why he's essentially undoing the good work that he's done. And a little bit later in the video, Antonio further comments on Eddie, what he means on Eddie Howe's management and where the identity of the team itself. So after that, I'm going to get you guys' comments and views on this as well. It's a really good review from Antonio.
And the game management by Eddie Howe was non-existent. And I'm
So he's not. Here we go. Sorry, let me go back on that. The game management is non-existent. He's about to say, I'm starting to repeat that too many times now.
And the game management by Eddie Howe was non-existent. And I'm starting to see that more and more. Doesn't have the tactical now to change a game to benefit Newcastle United.
Now, do you guys agree with this? Do you guys agree with this? This is what I want to ask you guys right now. Do you guys agree that Eddie Howe doesn't have or doesn't demonstrate enough tactical nous in games to be able to change games? Let me know what you guys think. I'm a little bit mixed on that, because I remember the Wolves game when he brought in substitutions that changed the game into our favor. But then we've got Brentford, we've got Crystal Palace, things of that nature. Let me know what you guys think. Does Eddie Howe demonstrate the tactical nous in games that he can change games?
And that's the worrying thing. He was bringing players on positions that they're not comfortable with and would just look all over the shop towards that end. And look, Brentford could have had 5 or 6 in that second half. People talk about identity. Newcastle United's identity last season was intensity. We've lost that completely. Now
we have lost our intensity. Why? My question is, why have we lost our intensity? Is it because of Eddie Howe's tactics, that we're playing a different way? The Liverpool game will suggest no. The Palace game suggests yes. The Brentford game will suggest yes, we've lost our identity. Then you go back to Arsenal, you go back to Chelsea League Cup game. So it feels like it's just all over the place, which is what Antonio was saying. Have we lost our intensity, guys? Let me know.
Last season was intensity. We've lost that completely.
And remember, last season when we had barely any players, we were still playing intense. We were still doing the intensity style.
Now our identity is inconsistency.
I love that. Now our identity is inconsistency. We have been inconsistent. It's hence why we're mid-table.
Because we can step it up for the big games and then we'll drop points against Crystal Palace. That performance against Crystal Palace, this performance against Brentford, we just can't get that consistency. And I've said it before in a video and I'll say it again. That comes from the manager. The tactics he's putting out isn't working. We just look so leggy in that second half. We're on the back foot consistently. And that just meant we couldn't get Isak in the game. We couldn't get bodies around Isak. We couldn't supply Isak with anything. And
it's on the manager. And Antonio's talked about this before, and not just Antonio, but there's other pundits, other people online. When we're talking about, for instance, we talked about the Palace game. For instance, Palace isn't the only game where I've done a review on Palace, and I've showed several examples of, but we have good approach play, we get to the box, and we don't have that killer pass. We just refuse to pass. Even that we try to pass the ball, we're even afraid to make mistakes, so we just go backwards. And that lack of confidence, and I was saying, where does that come from? And people are saying it's the manager. Only the manager can give you the confidence. Not only the manager. There is some internal responsibility from players to take responsibility and take risks, obviously. But you've got to have confidence. The manager's also got to inspire confidence and encourage the players, which Eddie Howe talked about in his interview with Simon Jordan. And then ironically, the next game comes Liverpool, and we showed all the confidence of a Champions League side. And we put on that performance against Liverpool. We did a bit of that against Brentford, and then second half, it absolutely disappeared. So why that inconsistency? What is it? Is it Eddie Howe's tactics? What is it Eddie Howe not consistently kind of encouraging and inspiring the team? Or is it that it's the players themselves that we've talked about where, we've got an aging centre-back line. Is it some of the situations that we faced from last season, essentially, that we've talked about that we're trying to clear up now? So we haven't bought significant players in the last 2 windows. We didn't get that right centre-back. If we had Mark Gahey now, for instance, or a player of that ilk, would our team look different? Probably. If we had a right wing forward, they're talking about Anthony Elanga. All respect to Anthony Elanga, I think we can do better. Hopefully, if we had Johan Bukayo, if we bought Johan Bukayo and Mark Gahey, and we had them right now in our team, would the team be performing differently? Would they be performing better? Probably, but we don't. If our injury record had been better, maybe Sven Botman wouldn't be injured now. If Sven Botman was in our team right now, partnered up with Mark Gahey, would our team look different? Yes. I know I'm going into the fantasy land, or not fantasy land, but like an ideal world scenario. But this is what maybe as an owner you're thinking about, and you're improving. The problem is that you're improving now. We're talking about things in hindsight. We're talking about things. I'm talking about things in hindsight. Had we done these things earlier, in terms of having performance director James Bunce last year, for instance, had we had Paul Mitchell last year, our transfer record history will look a lot different now. So I'm talking about in hindsight, and they say hindsight is 20/20 vision. So I think we're making the right decisions now. So we made the right decisions of our sporting director, performance director, all these type of things now. But we're seeing a little bit of the fruits now in terms of our injury record, but we're not quite seeing the fruits just yet in terms of the transfer window, which is coming up. So all that is left now is Eddie Howe. And what I think as an owner, and now as fans, we're trying to decide is, does Eddie Howe have a future at Newcastle United? In the short term, mid-term, and long term, but just overall now. In the short term, and I'm going to get onto this in terms of my conclusion, in the short term, Antonio points out the next 3 games, and I'm going to talk about that in my conclusion. And in the midterm for me is obviously the end of the season. They're going to probably really sit down and decide what if they have a future of Eddie Howe or not. But let me know what you guys think before I give my conclusion and my overall verdict on that. Let me know what you guys think of the show so far and where you're headed. I'm going to read your comments before I get to the conclusion of all of that. Thank you to all the guys that have come in. Do remember to like, share, and subscribe. Your comments have been incredible. We had some really good, incredible views and everything else. Let me know what you guys think. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think. Ginger Hoskins, here's one for you, Philip. Excuse me. Here's one for you, Philip. Who want Max Allegri? Do they know his manager's history is on board results, match fiction with Rex and Bayern wins. Juventus has relegated and hid away for years. I hope the owners know this. Yeah, exactly, Ginger Hoskins. I hope the owners know this. They're not going to buy him. Replace him. Fair play to you, Ginger Hoskins. Ginger Hoskins, Philip, if you're going to give examples, please don't listen to a man who claims he's a scout when he's not. He's a YouTuber who talks about young talent. I'm sorry, he's no scout. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. I'll have to ask Antonio. I took it for word that he is. Fair play to you, Ginger Hoskins. The mighty win. That's exactly the point. Is Bunce telling? But yeah. Okay. So the mighty win. That's exactly the point. Is Bunce telling Eddie that he can't start certain players because if we do, injuries will mount again? Yeah, I don't think. I agree with you, mighty win. I think the way Eddie Howe is, Bunce is probably strongly advising. I don't think it's Bunce telling him. I think it's the owners telling him. I think the owners have set out their vision through Bunce and Paul Mitchell and said, look, these are the problems that we've had before. Bad injury record, bad transfer strategy. These are the guys that, and we want to be able to be first in class and everything in our club, but also obviously in our outcomes, trophies, number one in the league, all these type of things. In order to be number one in the league and trophies and everything else, we want to be first class in our structure. That structure includes James Bunce and Paul Mitchell. Here's James Bunce. He's here to improve our injury record. It would be good for you to listen to him. Because now Eddie Howe's in the position where James Bunce might say, hey, look, Tonali probably needs a little bit of a rest. James Bunce won't say to them, you can't play him because you can't tell that to Eddie Howe. But if Eddie Howe ignores that advice, plays Tonali and Tonali gets injured, that gets reported back to the top. So now we're in that kind of situation, in my view. I'm hoping it's not as bad as that. I say it's bad, but I think there's a different level of accountability. I don't know how much of it enters in Eddie Howe's thinking. I think this was a short-term pain for the Brentford game and hopefully long-term game. That's what Eddie Howe will hope for the upcoming Leicester game, upcoming Brentford game, and upcoming Ipswich game, which we'll talk about. But good point, Marty Wynn. I think we're in that kind of new situation. This is a new situation for Eddie Howe. He hasn't had to answer to a performance director before. He hasn't had to talk to a sporting director before. This is new to him, very new to him. Who is that fella? If you're talking about, that's Antonio Mango. Antonio Mango. I do encourage you guys to go on his podcast. I don't know whether he's a qualified scout or not. I assume that he is. That's what he says in the thing. But I think he's really good. But let me know what you guys think. Antonio Mango, AG, good kid, especially on young players throughout Europe. Yeah, I think so too. I think it's incredible. Okay. You guys talking Eddie Howe's problems being reactive instead of it might win. Eddie Howe's problems being reactive instead of proactive. Ooh. Could be. Might he win instead of bringing Tonali and Gordon on to win the game, they're coming on to save the game. That's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem. That's what you mean about being reactive. Yeah. We kind of know that on 60 minutes, Eddie Howe's going to make changes. How about, can you see it, maybe a little bit earlier? Maybe a little bit earlier. If you can see the tide turn it. Mighty win. Also doing at halftime, doesn't use a sub window. J7 needed to be off at halftime after crocking his shoulder again without using the window. Yeah. Antonio, yeah, I can see Joe Linton's shoulder is playing up. You can see that. Sorry, antagonizing Geordie. Win. Oh, you're talking to Win. Davey Eddie, in fairness, we kept this ball away. We kept giving the ball away. We did. Sloppiness. Eddie Howe certainly isn't telling his players to lose the ball. It's baffling to all of us why it's happening. Antonio talked about it, how essentially it highlights how the poor technical quality we have in players. I do think partly he was a little bit vexed because if you look at the Liverpool game, sheesh, our passing was pretty good for most of the part. So I don't know. Like it's a puzzle to me, David, just like it is to you. And antagonizing Jordan when you bench Tonali, Gordon over Is and Murphy's madness. That's basics. Yeah, I think there's a reason why, and I think that reason is partly to do with the performance side of things. No balance in the squad, and Howe's finding it hard to find the balance. What do you mean by that in terms of that? I think there's balance in the first team squad. I think there's difficulty once you kind of go a little bit deeper. Yeah, I can kind of so there's a huge difference between taking off Tonali or taking off Tonali and putting Longstaff. That changes the profile of the squad. Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you on that one. There's a difference between having Burn and Botman. Huge difference. So yeah, I can see from that point of view. Davey Eddie, yes, Philip. Eddie does have a future, certainly until the end of the season, at least in my opinion. Fair play to you, Davey. Not for me, Davey, sadly, and I've always been Howe in, but it's clear how he picks the squad. We lose the next 2 games. He's gone, in my opinion. Fair. Okay, good. I'll say good call. Interesting call. And he can't figure out his first 11. And you know, some people have said that as well. So, guys, I'm going to take this to the conclusion part on Eddie and give you guys my final thoughts and feelings on Mr. Eddie Howe. I've mentioned, I'm going to, let me put my thing up again. Let me make sure you guys can see it. Did I put it? I mentioned, you know, from the beginning of the show was to my whole intention of the show from the beginning was to make sure that I gave a comprehensive view of Eddie Howe. Because before I kind of was like, oh, Eddie Howe in or Eddie Howe out, and gave a kind of my view on that. I wanted to make sure we had as a comprehensive view as possible. I talked about, obviously, in the introduction what this is all about, which is to figure out, as of now, are we Eddie Howe? Am I Eddie Howe in? Are we Eddie Howe in? Are we Eddie Howe out? Am I Eddie Howe in or Eddie Howe out? I kind of explained to you guys, for instance, what my expectation for this season is, which is 64 to 68 points, and obviously domestic cups, semi-finals and finals. That's looking a bit difficult at the moment, though we are in the quarterfinal for the League Cup, but still doable. We've still got a lot of points to go. And I've explained, obviously, in the introduction, so in terms of what our current problem is, and our current problem is we're 12th in the league. We're on all metrics, went through the metrics, goals conceded, expected goals, the amount of saves our keeper has to make, the amount of turnovers we get in the final third. We are mid-table or below mid-table, and in some metrics, relegation form. in terms of our metrics as a team, we're a very mid-table team, not only in league standings, but in terms of our metrics as well. So that's our problem currently in the season. This kind of also goes into our inconsistency, obviously, where we're playing really well against the top 5, top 6 teams, and we're doing horrifically against everybody else, essentially. So in order to be able to, that's our problem. And before I kind of went directly into, you know, the tactics of Eddie Howe and everything else, we talked about the 2 biggest problems from last season that I felt rippled into this season, which was our transfer strategy, which wasn't fit for purpose. And we talked about Eddie Howe's involvement in that, how obviously he kind of signed people from a short-term point of view that fit his first team. He's not thinking about, you know, the where we're going to be 3 years from now, PSR and everything else. And it's not his job to, but he was in the position where he had to do that. So there's responsibility for that. The bad injury record, which I think the owners put on him, because he talks about it in a different way. And we also talked about his achievements in that time. We talked about how he saved us from relegation. Yeah, not only did he save us from relegation, but we finished at a flurry. We finished 11th, 49 points. We finished the next season in Champions League spots and League Cup finals. We finished the following season in 7th spot. We could have been in Europe this season had Man United not won against Man City in the FA Cup. So we could have been in the Europe 2 seasons running. So he has a proven track record in terms of performance and achievements for Newcastle. Obviously, we want to win things, but we're leading up to that. He's also got shown his player development, and we've shown the incredible amount of players that he's developed. Not only Tino, Hall, Joe Linton, the incredible story behind that. We all know what happened there. You know, Anthony Gordon, who's a first teamer now for England, as well as Lewis Hall and others. So we know he can develop players. We know that he can do that. I talked about him as a leader and how, you know, John Maxwell's leadership structure 1 to 5. You know, Eddie exhibits levels 3 to 4. You know, the number 5 level was like Sir Alex Ferguson, Pep Guardiola, Jose Mourinho levels. So Eddie Howe's got the ingredients of being an elite top level manager, where he's had a track record in terms of performance, and he's also he's developing people, he's developing players, and you can ask the players themselves. They've told you what he means to them and what he's done for their career. Ask Joe Linton, ask Anthony Gordon, ask Lewis Hall, ask Tino Livramento. So the players are playing for him. He has a positive influence on that team and the overall culture of those teams. We talked about now Piv have put in solutions for the previous 2 big problems that we had for the transfer window, for our transfer strategies. So it's gone from not fit for purpose to hopefully fit for purpose. We're going to find out this January, whether that's the case. I think it will be. But also fixing our injury record. And that's where James Bunce comes in. And we've already seen the fruits of that. We have showed to you that, you know, there's, 33% reduction in our overall injury record, which is phenomenal. And we're seeing that on the bench. We're seeing Callum Wilson on the bench, Joe Willock, we're seeing Trippier, we're seeing guys, we're seeing a better bench. Whether it's a better quality of players, that's for up debate, up to the debate. But we're seeing Lewis Miley is also obviously back as well. So I talked about how as a leader, and now I've talked about the overall Newcastle structure, which is growing. You know, we are far better now than we was when we had the takeover itself, in my opinion. Where we've just started off with Amanda Stavely and Ruben Brothers and Howe, essentially. And Howe as a sporting director, he was everything. Obviously, we've gone on from Dan Ashworth, we've left that behind. We had the soul situation with Dougie Freeman and all of that craziness. And now I've got a solid background of people, I think, in Paul Mitchell and James Bunce, together with all the other staff and people that I haven't mentioned. But in terms of our scouting and everything else, that's improving our global scouts and everything else. So there's a growing structure in Newcastle United. Eddie Howe is now the question is Eddie Howe part of that growing team, growing structure? I'm prepared to say that Eddie Howe can be part of that growing structure. And he has the qualities, like I mentioned, in terms of growing, being able to develop players, which is going to be key to what Paul Mitchell is going to be doing. However, there are huge concerns, in my opinion, about some of Eddie Howe's tactics and in-game management in games, and the inconsistencies that we're seeing in the team when they're playing teams below the top 6. There are concerns about the team's level of inconsistency in their intensity as well, and their lack of confidence against lower league teams. Crystal Palace, second from bottom, not getting a shot on target against them. That's insane. How could that be happening? So I'm on the boat that says, essentially, Eddie Howe's got the next 3 games to show results. For instance, in my expectations for us to be in the semi-finals and finals of cup competitions, he has to beat Brentford at home. He has to be. You're at home. You're playing Brentford. You've got all the advantages. You've got a better team. You've got a better squad of players. you're at home. This is your chance now to progress. So he has to win that game for me. We're starting off with Leicester at home. I jumped the game. We're starting off at Leicester at home. Where is Leicester in the league, guys? Are they in the relegation zone? You can't do a West Ham job on Leicester. You can't lose 2-0 to Leicester and say, oh, but we've had a really good. I am looking for a good performance. That's important. I don't want to have a bad performance and win. I am expecting a good performance and a win as well. There's an expectation there. Same thing for Brentford, and also the game I'm probably really fixated on because I have doubts about it is Ipswich away, because not only is it away, but it's also against a side that's lower down the league that we're on paper expected to win against. And those are two bad combinations for Eddie Howe so far, playing away and playing against the team that you're expected to win. We need to see that Eddie Howe change things and develop things for his team. So I'm Eddie Howe in. I think he's turned it around before and he can turn it around again. My concern is for how long and how sustainable can he make it? He will have, God willing, Sven Botman coming back, and he will have the January transfer window. Maybe Paul Mitchell can pull a rabbit out the hat and bring him some players. We will see. But the next 3 games are vital for Eddie Howe and in terms of his tenure at Newcastle United. Should he lose, or he only gets 1 or 2 points from his league games and he gets knocked out the League Cup, I think it's over from that point of view for Eddie. So it's important that he wins. I think he will win. I think when his back has been against the wall, Eddie Howe's going to learn whether his approach to his players, whether he likes to be a player manager, he's developed their careers, he's protected them. They've all said that. He's developed them. The players now have to show, in my opinion, that they believe in his tactics, they believe in his approach, they can be intense, they can perform consistently, and they can take things forward. So this is now for the players to show that, and for Eddie Howe to show us as well. So I'm keen to see it. So for now, because of what Eddie Howe's track record so far for Newcastle United, saving us from relegation, finishing 11th that season, getting us to the Champions League, getting us to League Cup finals, and getting us on 60 points the following season with all the injuries that we've had, learning to work well with other directors like James Bunce that he's shown so far. I know that with Paul Mitchell, it's been a bit sketchy, more than sketchy, but we're going to learn a little bit more about that he can develop and he can change. I think he's got key ingredients there. But the results and performances on the pitch have to become more consistent. And he's got the next 3 games in the short term to show me that as a fan, and I'm sure to others as well, and to the owners most importantly. And I think if he does that, he will have January and February to demonstrate consistency. My expectations remain for the season that he gets between 64 to 68 points and to get into the semi-finals and domestic cups. So for now, I'm Eddie Howe in, but let me know what you guys' thoughts are. Let me know where you guys land on this. I'll be interested to hear and to see. I'm gonna read the final comments and end the show. Antagonizing Geordie, Eddie Howe makes poor subs, brings subs on, moves 3 players positions to accommodate that one sub. It was a domino effect. We lose shape. The rest is history. You're not impressed with Eddie Howe's tactics. David Eddie signings are vital, Philip, in the January window. Yes, it's a must really, and quality ones at that. Get to strengthen and freshen up. I agree. Meta Football, good to see you, sir. I hope you are well. Unfortunately, managers will always draw the short straw when things go wrong. Howe is a good manager, in my opinion, but there are too many variables to just always pin everything on the coach. And I agree, Meta Football. I don't know if you saw the rest of the show, but I've tried to cover as many variables as possible and take all those things into account and not just to boil it down to one thing. There's some good, there's some bad. And I think that he's shown tremendous qualities. That's why I'm still backing him. But he has to also kind of for me, he has to show the reasons why we're backing him in the first place. Because ultimately, for me, it's not about Eddie Howe. It's about Newcastle United. I want to see Newcastle United win leagues and win trophies, whether that's with Eddie or anybody else. So that's my kind of opinion on it. That's not just for Eddie Howe, that's for players as well. The mighty win, it's all very well Mitchell buying great youngsters, but that doesn't help. The first team right now, we need an influx of quality to inject life into the current first team. I agree. I don't think he's just going to buy youngsters. I don't think that's going to happen. Freshen is the key word, Davey. Oh, you guys are talking there. 100% win. Cheers, Philip. Good show. Appreciate you guys. So, guys, I'm Eddie Howe in. Though he has to prove himself in the short and mid-term. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Continue to send in your comments on the views as well. Eddie Howe in, Eddie Howe out. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Otherwise, I hope you had a great evening. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. This has been like the highest attended show I've ever had. I think at one point we were like 17, 18, 19 people, which is incredible. You know, we've gone from 0 to 1 live streams to now nearly 20, which is absolutely incredible. And it's all down to you guys. I appreciate you. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, guys, good evening and God bless, folks.